There's a moment in the life of every child raised by a narcissistic mother, a moment that changes everything, forever. It's the moment you finally see. You don't just see an isolated incident. You don't just see one mistake. You see the whole pattern, the entire architecture of manipulation, the system that's been operating since you were a child. Carl Jung called this a confrontation with the shadow. But when the shadow is your own mother, the confrontation becomes something much more dangerous. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to explain why this awakening is so destabilizing. I'm going to show you the 5 phases that every child goes through after seeing the truth. And I'm going to give you tools to survive this process without losing yourself. If you're just starting to question your childhood, this video could save your sanity. Let's start with the basics. What does it really mean to see? For years, probably decades, you've been living with an edited version of reality. Your mother created a narrative. In that narrative, she was the heroine, the devoted mother, the victim of circumstances, the person who did everything for you. And you believed it, because children believe their mothers, because you had nothing to compare it to, because your survival depended on believing. That narrative became the foundation of your reality, not just about your mother, about yourself, about what love is, about what you deserve. The moment of seeing is when that narrative starts to crumble. It might start with something small, a memory that surfaces, a conversation with a sibling, a book that describes your childhood exactly, a therapist who asks the right question. And suddenly, you see, not just what she did, but what she is. Jung described this moment as the lifting of the veil, and he warned that many people aren't prepared for what they find on the other side. Let me explain the 5 phases of the awakening. The first phase is shock. When you finally see, there's a moment of complete paralysis. Your brain can't process it. It's too much information. It's too contradictory to everything you believed. Physically, it can feel like a panic attack, difficulty breathing, racing heart, a sense of unreality. Psychologically, it's like the floor disappears. Everything you thought you knew about your life needs to be re-evaluated. This shock can last hours or weeks. Some people describe it as walking in a trance, functioning on autopilot while everything inside is collapsing. Jung observed that at this moment, the psyche enters survival mode. The defense mechanisms that protected you throughout your childhood are temporarily deactivated, and you're left exposed, vulnerable, unprotected. And that's why this moment is so dangerous. You're psychically naked in a moment of maximum crisis. The second phase is obsessive review. After the initial shock, the mind starts working frantically. You revisit every memory, every interaction, every moment of your childhood. It's like a gigantic file has been opened in your mind, a file that contains everything, every look, every word, every silence. Suddenly, things that didn't make sense start to connect. Her strange behavior at that party, the way she treated you in front of others versus when you were alone, the contradictions you ignored or justified. You realize that your mind was doing an enormous job all these years. A job of hiding, of minimizing, of rationalizing. Now that job stops, and everything that was hidden comes to the surface. That time she said that. Now it makes sense. That time you felt confused. Now you understand why. That vague feeling that something was wrong was right all along. This phase can be overwhelming. Memories that were buried come back with full force. Things you had forgotten or repressed resurface in the middle of the night. Some people describe it as a movie playing continuously. They can't stop analyzing, reinterpreting, finally seeing what was always there. Jung would call this the constellation of the complex, the maternal complex, which was operating unconsciously, now becomes conscious, and everything that was connected to it comes along with it. This phase is exhausting, physically and emotionally. You may have trouble sleeping, eating, functioning normally. It's important to understand that this is normal. Your psyche is doing an enormous job, reconstructing your entire history. This takes time and energy. The third phase is anger. After seeing and reprocessing comes anger, an anger that can be scary in its intensity. Many people who were raised by narcissistic mothers have trouble with anger. They learned that anger was dangerous, that expressing anger meant punishment, that good people don't feel anger. So when the anger finally emerges, it can feel wrong. It can feel like you're losing control. It can feel like you're becoming the person your mother always said you were. But anger is a healthy response to injustice. It's a healthy response to the violation of boundaries. It's a healthy response to years of abuse. The problem isn't feeling anger. The problem is what you do with it. Anger for everything that was done. Anger for everything that was stolen. Anger for the time lost. Anger for having believed. Anger because she never changed. Anger because you have to carry the consequences while she continues living as if nothing happened. Jung saw anger as a transformative force, energy that can be used for change, but also as something dangerous if it isn't well directed. Anger wants action, wants confrontation, wants justice. Some children in this phase decide to confront their mother. They want her to see. They want her to admit it. They want an apology, some recognition, something. This rarely works as expected. Narcissistic mothers don't admit, don't recognize, don't really apologize. And the confrontation often leaves the child even more wounded. Other children direct the anger towards themselves. How could I be so blind? Why did it take me so long to see? This self-directed anger is equally dangerous. Anger needs to be felt, validated, expressed safely. But it doesn't need to be transformed into destructive action. Jung recommended working with the shadow at this moment, recognizing the anger, giving it space, but not letting it take control. The fourth phase is grief. After anger comes something even more difficult: grief. Jung observed that many children of narcissistic parents skip this phase. They go straight from anger to action, to distancing themselves, to moving on. But skipping the grief is impossible without paying a price. Unprocessed grief doesn't disappear. It transforms into chronic depression, into difficulty connecting, into an emptiness that nothing fills. Grief needs to be lived completely, without rushing. You're not just sad about what happened. You're grieving for something that never existed. The mother you thought you had, the childhood you deserved, the love that should have been unconditional. It's a special kind of loss. You're losing something you never had, but that you hoped for, yearned for, desperately needed. This grief is unlike any other. You're mourning a fantasy, for an illusion that kept you alive for years. And at the same time, you're mourning your own innocence, for the child who needed to believe, for the part of you that still wanted your mother to be different. Carl Jung described this process as the symbolic death of the positive maternal complex. The idealized image of the mother that every child carries must die, so that reality can be seen. This death is painful, even when reality is better than the illusion. Even when seeing the truth is liberating, the death of the illusion still hurts. Some people describe this phase as depression, and it can feel like depression, exhaustion, lack of motivation, constant sadness. But it's different. It's a necessary grief. It's part of the healing process. The fifth phase is reconstruction. After the shock, the review, the anger, and the grief, something new begins. Reconstruction. This phase has no set start date. For some people, it takes months. For others, years. It depends on the depth of the wounds, the quality of the support, the willingness to do the work. It's important not to force it. There's no prize for healing quickly. In fact, trying to rush the process usually means you'll have to repeat it later. You can't go back to being who you were before you saw. That person no longer exists. The illusion has been destroyed. But you can build something new. An identity based on truth. Relationships based on reality. A life free from manipulation. This new life won't be perfect. You'll still carry the scars. You'll still have patterns to unlearn. You'll still be triggered in situations that resemble the original dynamic. But it will be yours. For the first time, it will be genuinely yours. This phase is slow. There's no rush. You're literally rebuilding the foundation of your psyche. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming who you really are, separated from the projections of your parents, separated from the roles you were forced to assume, separated from the illusions you needed to maintain to survive. Now let me explain why this process is so dangerous. The first danger is the destabilization of your sense of reality. If your mother was narcissistic, you grew up with constant gaslighting. Your perception was invalidated. Your memories were questioned. You learned to distrust yourself. When you finally see the truth, you need to trust your perception. But after years of gaslighting, that's extremely difficult. And you might swing between absolute certainty and total doubt. One moment you know what you saw, the next moment you're questioning everything again. This back and forth can feel like craziness, but it's a normal consequence of prolonged gaslighting. The second danger is the collapse of relationships. When you see the truth about your mother, you start to see patterns elsewhere. Friends who are manipulative, partners who repeat the same behaviors, colleagues who exploit your need for approval. Jung observed that children of narcissistic parents frequently recreate the original dynamic in other relationships, not by conscious choice, because it's familiar, because the nervous system recognizes it as normal. So when you start to see, you might realize that much of your life has been built around toxic dynamics, not just with your mother, with friends, with partners, with bosses. This realization can be devastating. You look around and see manipulation on all sides, and you start to question every relationship. It can feel like everyone is a narcissist, that there is no safe relationship, that you can't trust anyone. This is partially true. Children of narcissistic mothers often attract similar people. They recognize the dynamic as familiar. They confuse manipulation with love. But there's also the risk of seeing narcissism where it doesn't exist, of discarding healthy relationships out of paranoia, of isolating yourself completely. The third danger is a fragmented identity. Much of your identity was built in relation to the narcissistic mother. You defined yourself by what she needed, by the roles she required, by the characteristics she projected onto you. When the mother falls off the pedestal, part of your identity falls with her. Who am I if I'm not what she said I was? Who am I if my childhood was a lie? Who am I outside of this dynamic? These questions can be terrifying, and the temptation to answer quickly, to create a new identity immediately, can lead to problematic choices. Jung warned against this. The reconstruction of identity needs to be slow and careful. Building too quickly on unstable foundations leads to another collapse. The fourth danger is guilt and shame. As much as you understand intellectually that it wasn't your fault, the guilt and shame appear. Guilt for having believed, for having participated in the dynamic, for having at times acted in ways that you now see as problematic. You might look back and see moments when you were cruel, moments when you repeated her patterns, moments when you hurt other people because it was all you knew. This is devastating, realizing that you weren't just a victim, that you also, somehow, perpetuated the cycle. Shame for being the child of a mother like that, for having this history, for still, at some level, wanting her love. Shame says that you're defective, that you should have been able to escape, that normal people don't have mothers like that there's something wrong with you for having come from her. Jung understood shame as one of the most toxic emotions. It doesn't motivate change. It paralyzes. It hides. It prevents healing. Working through shame requires bringing it to light, sharing it with someone safe, realizing that you're not alone, that millions of people have similar stories. These emotions can be overwhelming, and they can sabotage the healing process if they aren't addressed. The fifth danger is the impulse to save others. Many children, after seeing the truth, feel an urgency to alert others. Siblings who haven't seen yet, the father who remains manipulated, anyone who might be a victim. It's understandable. You spent years in the dark. Now that you see, you want everyone to see too. You want to protect those still trapped in the dynamic. This impulse comes from a good place, but it can be destructive. First, and because not everyone is ready to see, forcing someone to confront a truth for which they are not prepared can be traumatic. Secondly, because you're still in the middle of your own process. Trying to save others while you're still drowning, it just doesn't work. Thirdly, because it might be a way to avoid your own internal work. It's easier to focus on others than to feel your own pain. Now, let me give you some tools to navigate this process. The first tool is professional support. This is not a process to do alone. You need a therapist who understands childhood trauma, who understands narcissism, who can help you process without getting lost. Carl Jung always emphasized the importance of the therapist in this process. Someone who can witness, someone who can validate, someone who can serve as an anchor while everything else is in chaos. But not just any therapist. Many don't understand the dynamics of narcissistic mothers. They might even invalidate your experience. They might tell you that you're exaggerating, that your mother did the best she could, that you should forgive and move on. That type of therapist can cause more harm than good. You need someone specialized, someone who understands that what you experienced was real, that your reactions are normal, that the healing process takes time. If you can't afford individual therapy, there are support groups, in person or online. Being with people who have gone through the same thing is extremely validating. Seeing that you're not alone, that others understand, that your experience makes sense. The second tool is external validation. After years of gaslighting, you need validation. Someone who confirms that what you saw is real, that your perception is correct, that you're not crazy. This can come from your therapist, from a sibling who also sees it, from a close friend, from a community of people with similar experiences. It's not weakness to need validation. It's a legitimate need after years of having your reality denied. The third tool is pacing yourself. You don't have to process everything at once. In fact, you can't. Trying to force the process leads to overwhelm. Give yourself permission to go slowly, to have days when you don't think about it, to alternate between confronting the truth and resting from it. Jung talked about the process of enantiodromia. When something goes too far in one direction, it automatically reverts to the opposite. If you force the confrontation too much, you'll end up in denial again. The fourth tool is taking care of your body. Childhood trauma is stored in the body. The process of seeing the truth often triggers physical symptoms: tension, insomnia, digestive problems, aches and pains without a medical cause. Take care of your body during this process. Sleep, nutrition, movement. It's not self-indulgence, it's a need. Somatic practices can help. Yoga, meditation, breathing exercises, anything that reconnects you with your body in a safe way. The fifth tool is writing. Writing can be extremely therapeutic in this process, not to publish or show to someone, but to process. Write your memories as they return. Write your anger. Write your grief. Write the letters you'll never send. The act of putting it into words helps to organize the internal chaos. It makes concrete what seems overwhelming. The sixth tool is establishing boundaries. During this process, you'll probably need distance from your mother. Maybe temporarily, maybe permanently. This isn't cruelty. It's self-preservation. You can't process the trauma while you continue to be traumatized. Jung talked about the need for psychic separation from parents as part of the individuation process. This separation doesn't need to be physical, but it needs to be real. For many children of narcissistic mothers, physical separation is necessary, at least for a while. Her presence continually reactivates the old patterns, continually puts you in survival mode, continually prevents you from accessing your true self. Boundaries can vary. Minimal contact. No contact. Contact only in specific situations with clear rules. Some people manage to maintain limited contact after the healing process. Others find that no contact is the only option that works. There's no universal right answer. What works for one person doesn't work for another. The important thing is that the boundaries serve your healing, not your revenge. Boundaries aren't punishment, they're protection. If your boundaries come from anger, they'll probably change when the anger passes. If they come from self-care, they tend to be more stable. Now let me tell you about something that Jung observed. The process of seeing the truth about the narcissistic mother often awakens the child's own shadow. This is something that many people don't expect. They think that seeing the truth will be liberating, and it is. But it's also disturbing in unexpected ways. For years, you repressed parts of yourself to survive. Anger, needs, aspects of your personality that your mother didn't accept. You buried everything that could cause conflict, everything that she didn't approve of, everything that could threaten the fragile balance of the relationship. This repression had a purpose. It kept you safe. It allowed you to survive in an impossible situation. But it also created a huge shadow. When the mother falls off the pedestal, these repressed parts want to emerge, and some of them can be scary. You might discover an anger that seems bottomless, a capacity for manipulation that you learned by observing, a coldness that you developed as protection. thoughts that shock you. This doesn't mean that you are a narcissist. It means that you have a shadow. Everyone does. The work is to integrate that shadow, not to repress it again, not to act blindly, but to integrate it consciously. Jung said that what we don't bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fate. If you don't work on your own shadow, you'll repeat it. You'll become, in some aspects, what you fear most. Shadow integration is an essential part of the healing process. Now let me tell you about something that many people experience in this process. The phenomenon of recovered memories. During the process of seeing the truth, memories that were buried begin to return. Things that you had completely forgotten, or that you had remembered differently. This can be confusing and frightening. You start to question all your memories. What's real? What was edited by your mind to be more tolerable? Jung understood that memory isn't a tape recorder. The mind distorts, edits, represses, especially traumatic memories. When you start to see the truth, some of these memories come back in their original form, without the editing, without the minimization, and it can be shocking. Some people have memories that seem to come from nowhere. Images, sensations, fragments. It doesn't always make sense. It's not always a complete story. This is normal. Childhood trauma. It's often stored in a fragmented way, not as a neat, tidy narrative, but as disconnected pieces, scattered and seemingly random. Therapeutic work helps integrate these fragments, to make sense of what feels like utter chaos, to weave a coherent narrative of your own history, your own story. But this takes time. It's important not to force it, not to try and remember more than what comes naturally, not to fill in the gaps with assumptions, because those assumptions can lead you astray. The truth emerges in its own rhythm. Trust the process. It will reveal itself. Now, a final reflection. Seeing the truth about your narcissistic mother, it's one of the most painful processes imaginable. There are no shortcuts. There's no way to skip the stages. And tragically, there's simply no way to avoid the pain. You have to go through it. But on the other side, there lies freedom. Freedom from a narrative that was never yours. Freedom from roles you never chose. Freedom from a dynamic that kept you trapped for decades. Freedom to finally know who you really are, not who she said you were, not who you needed to pretend to be in order to survive, but who you are, at the deepest core of your being. This process is dangerous because it transforms everything. And transformation always involves death. The death of the person you once were. The death of the relationship you thought you had. The death of illusions that protected you. For a time. But without that death, there is no rebirth. And that rebirth is real. I know it seems impossible when you're in the throes of pain. It feels like the pain will never end. It feels like you'll never feel whole again. But you will. People who've gone through this process describe a profound change, a sensation of finally being at home within themselves, a peace they've never known before, a deep-seated sense of self. Carl Jung believed deeply in the psyche's capacity to heal itself, to transform even the deepest wounds into wisdom, to use pain as fuel for individuation, for becoming your true self. If you're in the midst of this process, know that you are not alone. Millions of people have gone through the same thing, and they've survived, and they've found, on the other side, a life more authentic than they ever imagined possible. You can find that life too. You deserve that life. And every step you take in this process, no matter how painful it may be, brings you closer to it, closer to yourself. This awakening is dangerous, but it's worth every single second of pain. Until the next video. And remember, seeing the truth is dangerous, but not seeing it is even more dangerous, because you continue living a lie. Continue repeating patterns you don't understand. Continue being controlled by something you can't even name, a shadow lurking in the background. The truth hurts, but the truth also liberates. Choose freedom. Choose truth. Choose you. And if you're just beginning this process, let me tell you something important. It's going to get worse before it gets better. This isn't pessimism, it's realism. When you start to see the truth, you open a box that was closed for a reason. What's inside is painful, incredibly, shockingly painful. The first few months, they can be the hardest of your life. You might question whether it was worth it, whether it wouldn't have been better to have continued in the illusion, whether the price of truth is simply too high. It's natural to feel that way. In those moments, remember that the pain is temporary, that on the other side there's something better, that millions of people have gone through this same process and have found eventually peace. Don't give up in the middle, don't do it. The middle is the worst place to be. You've already destroyed the illusion, but you haven't built anything in its place yet. It's a terrifying void, a gaping emptiness, but it's temporary. If you keep going, you'll find solid ground. You'll build a life based on truth. You'll know yourself in ways you never imagined possible. It's waiting for you. Carl Jung dedicated his life to understanding this process, to helping people traverse it, to helping them through the darkness. He knew it was painful, but he also knew it was necessary. There was simply no other way, because the alternative is to live a lie, and to never know who you really are, and to spend your life reacting to a trauma you can't name, trapped in a cycle you can't break. You deserve more than that. You deserve the truth. You deserve to know yourself. You deserve a life free from the invisible chains that have held you for so long. Release yourself. Until the next video.